This is MIDI data, being recorded live. However, this isn't your standard MIDI data being played by a human, but rather this MIDI data is being generated by a series of stock Ableton Live plugins that I've strung together to form what I am calling the Melodizer. It can be used to generate random melodies, but gives you control not only of a variety of expressive parameters, but can be set to play in any scale you wish. In this case, the pattern being generated is in C minor, and is being used to control Cherry Audio's Juno emulation of the DCO 106. This MIDI effect rack is available for free on my website, and the link will be in the description. But in the meantime, let's talk about why I made the Melodizer and how this may be useful to your music creation. What's up, my friends? Nick from Gorley Records here. The other day, I was watching a really interesting video on a channel called Little Ambient Machine. The video was showcasing a small Eurorack system which could be used for ambient synthesis. And at the core of that note generation was a module by Vermona called the Melodizer. It is a stochastic pattern generator which can be used to just create random melodies and rhythms. It's a fun little module, but it does come at the price tag of $450. But I loved the idea and the spirit of this type of note generation, and I thought to myself, hey, I could probably make this using Ableton stock plugins. So I did, and thus the Melodizer was born. It doesn't quite function the exact same as Melodizer, obviously, because I'm limited to the stock plugins within Ableton Live Suite, though in spirit it does fulfill a pretty similar goal of generating random note melodies. Let's check it out. Okay, so here is the Melodizer. It is one MIDI effect rack, but within that MIDI effect rack are three other racks, which are basically the different sections for the control parameters for Melodizer. You have note speed and range. Here you can choose your time divisions, the length of the notes, also choose which range of notes will be played. You have note velocities, and each one of these is a slider which changes the velocities for whether that note is playing or not. All the way off means that note is not playing. Full means that note will play at max velocity. I also have this preset section here of the different keys. So I have major and minor keys in here already pre-programmed, so you can just really quickly choose the key you want. And this velocity section is sort of a big difference between the Melodizer and the Melodicer. The Melodizer doesn't use velocities. Each one of these sliders is actually probability, and the higher up the slider is, the more probable it is that that note will play. Whereas this is velocities, which actually creates a lot of expressive capabilities, especially when using piano keys, for instance. And then the third panel with these orange knobs is exit velocity. So this will sort of override any velocity parameters here, so you can sort of fine tune your minimum velocity, maximum velocities, randomizing it, etc. So okay, so let's play with this for a second. So here I have Addictive Keys loaded up. This is just a modern upright playing, and I'm just going to press play, and it's going to automatically start playing notes without any MIDI data being selected. So you don't need to have a MIDI clip at all playing. You just press play and it will start generating notes. Now, if you want it to just turn off, you can either turn off the plugin, mute the track, or you can just turn this enable disable knob down, which is just an easy way to turn it on and off. You can also automate this knob with MIDI clips, one MIDI clip where it's on and another where it's off. That way you can live performance trigger this on or off. So here you can hear our piano playing. You can change your time division here. Right now it's just on 1/16, but you can speed it up or you can slow it down. We'll stick with 16ths for now. By default, this is playing 100 millisecond length notes, but you can turn this up so the notes are more sustained. A note about the length, the way I constructed this thing was using the rotating rhythm generator, and this is an Ableton Live Suite plugin. So if you don't have Ableton Live Suite, you won't be able to use this. You need to have this on here. But essentially the way this works is there are 4 different notes that can be played through the rhythm generator. And so that means every 4 notes, it'll cycle back and start playing again through the generator. And that means whatever that first note that's played, come the 5th beat, that first note will be overwritten. So if you're playing a really short time division and you have your length really long, you'll notice that the notes are cut off. And that's because that first note is actually being lifted and then playing another note. If you find they're not lasting long enough, if you're using a piano, you can always hold down the sustain pedal and they will last longer. Or if you're using a synthesizer, you can increase your release and that will make sure that the notes last longer in there as well. This rhythm generator then feeds into a note length plugin, and this is just used in order to change this length knob. The time divisions here, as you can see, these are all set to the rotating rhythm generator, and these are all set to different offsets, and what that allows me to do is have more notes. If there was just one thing generating notes in here, then every time a new note is played, that note would be overridden. So at least when you have 4 notes playing, you have a note last the length of 4 notes before it gets cut off and a new note is played, which kind of just opens up more expressive capabilities. And then all that feeds into a randomizer here with 100% chance, and this is going to randomize the note that is being played, and you can change the range of notes being played using these parameters here. So note range, as you can see, is changing the randomizer choices knob. This is just how many notes basically you're feeding into the randomizer for it to work with. Multiply range takes that range and multiplies it by whatever number it is here. And this is also the same as the scale knob in randomizer. And then the bottom note here is actually changing the bottom notes in the rotating rhythm generator. So you'll see these 4 notes here. As you change this, it changes the bottom note. So you basically set your low end and then your max range of how high you want it to go. So if you only want it to play lower notes, you just set your note range, your bottom note down low, your note range to, relatively low, and then it'll only play low notes. You increase the multiply range, and it'll play pretty much randomly across the whole key bed. Now, random notes aren't really useful if you're trying to compose something in a certain key, obviously. So that feeds us into the next section, which is note velocities. Okay, so in the note velocity section, when you first start the plugin, this will just be in the reset/off position. And with all knobs off, when you press play, no notes will be generated until you start turning some on. And remember, this is velocities, not probabilities. So as you start turning knobs up, you'll start noticing more notes come into the pattern. The way this section works is I have basically all these different chains set up for each different key. So for each one of these notes, there is a scale tied to it where only that note is active. And each one of these chains feeds into a velocity, and that velocity for the output high is tied to these knobs. So when you turn it to 0, that note won't be heard at all. If a note is set to 0 velocity, not only will that note not be audible, obviously, but if that note is generated from the random rhythm generator, it will actually skip that note. So it won't replace any notes, it will just skip right past them. And this actually is kind of nice because it creates rests in your melodies, which is kind of essential to writing melodies. If it, instead of skipping, actually replaced with a note that was active, every note it would play a note, so you would just have like an arpeggiated rhythm. So instead of being like da 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 dun dun da 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 dun, it would be like da 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 da, and then you might as well just be using an arpeggiator. So when you first load up Melodizer, all these knobs are going to be turned off, and this is the reset off position. There's also this chromatic, which is everything on, which is going to be just a lot of notes. Probably not useful in most instances, but it's there. Otherwise, you come in here and you select what key you want to be working in. Let's say in this case, C minor. It's going to load up C minor and all the velocities are going to be set. I set these velocities to have certain emphasis, so the root note hits the hardest. Thirds and fifths, like a triad, they hit at about 3/4 velocity. Relative minor and major notes, depending on what scale you're in, those are going to hit at about half velocity, and any diminished notes are going to hit at about 1/4 velocity. I find that this adds just a nice level of expressiveness, especially when using piano inserts. And again, I had the devices turned on here. When you normally load it, these are going to be hidden, but I just wanted to show you how I have this set up. This then feeds into what I've called the exit velocity section. Let's open this up here. This is just a single chain, and this is just one velocity MIDI effect here. And so basically it lets you dial in the min velocity, the max velocity, randomizer, as well as velocity curve. And these velocity parameters will override the velocity parameters here. So if you just want to quickly choose a scale, but you think that 127 is too strong of a velocity, you can just turn this down and it will automatically tame that velocity. Now, this minimum velocity here does not override any of the off notes. So if you have like E, C sharp, whatever turned off, turning this min velocity up won't activate these notes. It'll keep them disabled because it's processing through is 0 velocity. So nothing is sent basically to this velocity knob. So it doesn't pick those up. So this is just taming the notes that are being triggered. Now, something important to note with this is that whatever MIDI track it is inserted on, MIDI will not be recorded to that track directly. So if I press record on one of these clips, no MIDI will be generated, even though you can hear these notes playing. So if you want to record MIDI to a clip, you just have to send Melodizer to a different track. So here with the DCO 106, for example, we have MIDI from the Melodizer insert, which is this track here. And now when I record onto this track, you will see that the MIDI is recorded. Now, if you're still wondering how this could possibly be useful, let me just show a potential use case for the Melodizer. Okay, so here I've loaded up the GX80. This is Cherry Audio's new CS80 synthesizer, and it is awesome. I'm making a preset pack for it. Here's the sound. Let's say we want to record just a couple chords list. Let me just record quick chords. Okay. Okay, now we got some chords in there. Let's go ahead and have Melodizer send our audio to our DC-106. So we've already got the MIDI from set up. Let's just go ahead and arm for record. And now it's just generating random MIDI notes in the same key over this. Now we can come over here to Melodizer and maybe speed it up. Maybe turn off a few notes. Maybe increase the note range. Now that it's automatically creating melodies for me, I can now mess around within my synthesizer and play with parameters while it's doing its own thing, kind of like a sequencer. Kind of just makes some fun sounds. It's all about fun here. Now, let's say I also want to maybe send it to the Pro 1. Got my Pro 1 set up here. Let's mute everything else. Well, we'll keep our GX80 on. We have MIDI from Melodizer, arm that for recording, and now let's press play. Now I can play with my Pro 1 and have this just kind of do its thing. And what's nice is I can send this to multiple tracks, or of course I can just insert it on multiple tracks. So let me actually just go ahead and put the Melodizer directly onto my Pro 1 track. Now I can load up a different pattern here. Maybe I only want it to play lower notes. And I also want to maybe turn the DCO-106 back on. So I'll have the DCO-106 play higher notes, and I'll have the Pro 1 play lower notes with the GX80 just playing chords. Select the scale. Now it's just making music for us. Now what's also fun is even mapping some of these parameters to some sort of knob or MIDI control in your studio, and then it allows you to sort of change the performance of Melodizer as you're playing. So let's go back here to just our piano insert here with addictive keys. Just have it playing simply. Let's say we want to have the length mapped. I have an expression pedal at my foot. It looks like this, just a little expression pedal, up and down. So I'm going to map my note length to my expression pedal, as well as my minimum velocities. And you can tune those in more specifically up here. So what this is going to do is as I increase my pedal, it's going to increase my length and also increase my maximum velocity. And this is going to just kind of make it more aggressive and hold the notes longer. So it goes from sort of these cute little plucks to sort of some big mashing on the keys. And maybe while it's doing that and I have that pedal doing its thing, maybe I also want to just play some keys over the top of that. So here's another instance of addictive keys. So my expression pedal, even while I'm playing on this track, will still increase these up and down. So let me just go ahead and play some chords on this second instance of addictive keys and have the one with Melodizer kind of doing its own thing. And I'm moving that expression pedal too. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be useful for everybody, and I get that, but it's just kind of a fun experimental tool that I thought people would enjoy messing around with. But that's Melodizer. Again, link will be down below. I'm going to start having more Ableton racks on my store. This is just the first one I've put up there, so stay tuned for more. And if you've enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell. And don't forget to put pants on before you leave the house,